My guest on Straight Talk this week is Malcolm Pearson, leader of the United Kingdom Independence Party, known as UKIP. Malcolm Pearson, you were appointed to the House of Lords by Margaret Thatcher in 1990. Why did you desert the party whose leader gave you a seat in Parliament?
Well, I felt I was still being loyal to Margaret Thatcher when I left the Conservative Party. But she only lasted for a year after I was put in, and then we got John Major, which wasn't the same thing at all. And in the end, I felt I had to leave the party because I'd given up hoping that the leadership, the foreseeable leadership, would ever take an honourable position on our membership of the European Union.
But Margaret Thatcher, although undoubtedly became a Eurosceptic, of that there is no doubt, she's never wanted to leave the European Union.
Well, I don't think I should comment on Margaret Thatcher's pronouncements since she left office. But she has made it perfectly clear, I think even in her last book, that she felt deceived over the Single European Act. And she did vote with us and take a very active part in 1992 when we wanted to get a referendum on the Maastricht Treaty.
But your core policy is for Britain to leave, cease its membership of the European Union. And that is not something Margaret Thatcher has ever espoused.
Well, I don't want to comment on Lady Thatcher's views.
Are you saying that because privately you've heard her say she has?
If she had said it privately, I wouldn't tell you what her views were.
Well, had she said it roughly, privately?
Not roughly or privately or in any way.
So you agree with me, she doesn't share UKIP's policy of leaving?
I don't know what Lady Thatcher's latest view is on the Lisbon Treaty and where we are now with the European Union.
Okay. Why did you become leader of your party, of UKIP, after joining it for only 2 years? It seems a sudden and dramatic elevation.
Well, I have been very Eurosceptic, and I've known that this country in the end has to leave the European Union. Since I made the mistake of reading the Treaties of Rome in 1992, which not many people have done.
I'm just puzzled as to why you suddenly became leader of your party after only 2 years.
Well, because at the spring, there's a conference in Milton Keynes, whenever it was in September, Nigel Farage stood down as leader at very short notice. And because he's got a big job to do in the European Parliament, he wanted to fight the Speaker in Buckingham, and he felt the load was just too much. So he stood down, which was quite a shock to all of us. And I then was lobbied by a number of people asking me if I would stand for the leadership.
Did you want to do it?
No, not
you
particularly.
You had to be dragged like the Speaker to his chair.
I wouldn't say I was dragged. I mean, my initial reaction was, I've never really been a politician. I've got a distaste for the political class as a whole, although I have friends as individuals who are politicians. And I didn't want to do it, but I was in the end persuaded that I should try to do it. I should run for the leadership. And, now I'm very glad that I did, and it is a very great honour.
But no other party leader has sat in the unelected House of Lords since Lord Salisbury in 1902. This is 2010. It's not very 21st century.
Well, I don't see why not. In that sense, it's an honour, if you like. And anyway, I was elected to the
honour.
I was elected to the leadership. But there were some other candidates.
It's a Victorian honour to have a leader of a modern democratic party in an unelected Lords.
You may take that view, but we'll have to see what the electorate make of it.
Indeed, but is there a defence of it?
We shall see.
But all the main party leaders, Gordon Brown, David Cameron, Nick Clegg, they're all giving people the opportunity to back or sack them on May the 6th. We have no opportunity to back or sack you. You're in the Lords, whatever the result.
Well, I hadn't looked at it like that. On the other hand, I don't think Gordon Brown was elected as leader of his party. He just took over.
No, I agree he's been elected.
Of course he's different. Well, there it is. Perhaps I'm an anomaly. But as I say, we'll have to see what... Well, I don't think this worries, as far as I can tell, I don't think this worries the electorate at all.
Your party argues that nothing can really change in Britain for the better until we leave the European Union. And there is a clear Eurosceptic mood in this country, which I think is hard to deny, and a lot of the printed press is Eurosceptic as well. Why has this general feeling, almost of hostility at times, to Europe, not translated itself into a a higher share of the vote for your party?
Because I think the question of leaving Europe is always quite far down the opinion polls, and it's quite boring. Europe is remote to the people, and it was designed to be so. But the fact does remain that we say a large majority of our national law, and the government says a majority of all law affecting our business and commerce and all that, is now made in Brussels. And the people, and Parliament is completely irrelevant from that. After the process of EU lawmaking, where the laws are proposed in secret by the Commission, negotiated in secret in the Committee of Permanent Representatives. I mean, all this is very boring. I mean, people are losing me as I say this.
I mean, a House of Commons library study said it was less than 10%.
Well, but that's because they included all law. We're talking about national law. We're not talking about statutory instruments and street cones and local government legislation. The figure we rely on is that of the German government and the previous German Chancellor.
Given that that's true...
And that is 84%.
Right, let me not argue with
okay.
that. Let me accept that for the basis of this argument. And given, again, this Eurosceptic attitude in Britain, all the more remarkable that in 2005, in the last election, you got 2.3% of the vote. Yep. You had 496 candidates, 458 of them lost their deposit, which means they got less than 5% of the vote.
Yeah, I think the party concentrated too much then on the business of leaving the European Union. What we are going to do this time is to widen that debate and to show two key policies. I think the two key policies of this election are probably, two areas of this election, are probably going to be the economy and immigration. And we are going to lead on those as problems that you can't really solve if you stay in the European Union. And I say that because what the political class, if I may say, the three failed old parties, as I call them, refuse to discuss, and the government and everyone has refused to discuss for years, is the cost of our European Union membership.
Let me come on to that in a minute, and I will.
But if I could we're also going to discuss immigration, because also the problem of immigration, of controlling our borders, cannot really be adequately done while we stay in the European Union.
Isn't it harder in the aftermath of a major global recession, where this country has been reeling, that in an age of uncertainty, people don't really want to leave the EU. They may not warm to it, they may resent it at times, but they don't want to leave it.
Well, that is because there is a well-worn soundbite which has been used by the political class, by the three failed old parties for many years now. And that soundbite has gone into the subconscious of the British people. And it runs along the lines of 3 million jobs and 60% of our trade depend on our membership of the European Union. Now they say are linked to our membership of the European Union. And in doing so, they imply that were we to leave the political construct of the treaties of Rome, were we to leave the European Union, that our trade and jobs would in some way suffer. And this is, in a way, the heart of the economic debate when we're talking about the EU and our economy. Because of course, it isn't true. Once you've withdrawn from the Treaty of Rome, otherwise you've repealed the 72 Act, what changes? Nothing in our trade changes because, first of all, we are, if you like, the EU's, although it's not the EU, it's all the companies that trade together and interact. We are their largest client. They sell us far more than we sell them. And there is no question that were we to leave the political construct of the EU, our trade and jobs would continue exactly as is.
Well, you would hope so, but I think...
Well, why wouldn't it? Sorry.
The point I'm trying to make is that at a time when we've had this terrible recession, and that we have a recovery which even the Prime Minister describes as fragile, you would not want to knock that in any way with a game-changing move like withdrawal.
But if we were to have a referendum, because we would reach this position via a referendum of the people, which was incidentally promised by all three parties to the people, we would have a referendum campaign, obviously, and we would be able to explain precisely why leaving the European Union can only be of huge benefit. Don't forget that the the Taxpayers' Alliance have put the cost at the overall cost of our EU membership at up to £120 billion. Now, that's a huge figure in the context of the economy. Worse than that, you're looking at the failed main parties now vying with each other to save, I don't know what it is, 11 billion from public expenditure. But what is the sum of money we send in cash every year? Part of the 120 billion. It's 16 billion. Okay, I'll give you 2 billion of that for our agriculture, if you like. But that is the gross figure. That is the gross figure.
Figures I have showing net cost of membership of 4 billion.
No, the net cost of membership next year is going to be 10 billion. And it was 6.4 billion, according to the Pink Book, last year. In 2000, in fact, in 2008, the net cost was 6.4 billion. And let's look forward. I mean, there is no doubt that next year the net cost, that's not, I gave you the gross cost, but the net cost is going to be 10 billion. And that's 27 million pounds a day. We are talking huge figures here, which the failed main parties, the failed old parties, well, I've decided to stop calling them the main parties, the failed old parties just don't want to discuss.
Well, in September 2008, the Treasury made a statement on the EC budget and said the UK's gross contribution was just under £10 billion for the year. It was expected that the net figure after receipts would be £4 billion.
Yeah, but you were looking 2 years ago then. And I'm looking now at the latest Pink Book figures, which I can show you, and they show that the net figure last year was 6.4 billion, and next year is going to be 10. Don't forget, we're going to be losing our rebate. Now, it obviously depends what happens to the pound and the euro and all that. I mean, but all this shows, surely, what this really shows is that at the very least we should have a serious, independent cost-benefit analysis. Well, and none of the three main parties want it.
Let me suggest to you what would be some costs. Some would be economic, some would be political. This country has benefited hugely from foreign direct investment. We have the second largest stock of foreign investment of any country in the world. It would surely affect the investment decisions of major corporations, particularly if they were thinking, as many have, of using Britain as an aircraft carrier into the continental Europe, that if we would withdraw, they would think, we're not going there. I mean, to advocate your position, you should really be mayor of Dublin, because Dublin would benefit enormously.
Well, but hold it. Don't forget, this is what they told us about not joining the currency. They said if we didn't join the euro, inward investment was going to dry up. And anyone who has lived in international business knows that our membership of the European Union doesn't, as such, does not affect inward investment. What is affected, what does encourage is the fact we talk English, the time zone we're in, and of course the fact that we have free access to the market, which we would keep.
You hope. It's seriously your decision that if we were to withdraw from the EU, that would make no difference to the investment decisions of international multinational companies.
Absolutely, and over time, our position would improve because we would get rid of all the over-regulation which is forced on us by Brussels. And the figure I gave you of £120 billion a year includes a figure which comes from the Commission itself, from Mr. Verheugen. Of half of that figure is over-regulation and all the costs that come from it. So actually we say that it would set us free. It would be immensely advantageous economically. And it was, don't forget, only 9% of our GDP, only 9% of British GDP goes in trade with the European Union. 11% goes in trade with the rest of the world. And 80% stays right here in the domestic economy. Now, I'm not saying the 9% isn't important, but the fact is that the regulation from Brussels, the cost of Brussels over-regulation, afflicts 100% of our economy, the whole economy. Those are the figures to look at.
Let me move from the corporate to the individual. At the moment, if you're British, you can enjoy equal rights to study, work, or retire, and receive health care throughout the EU. We would lose that if we left.
But I'm not sure the healthcare is all that easy at the moment. But could I put you in the position of Switzerland? Switzerland enjoys all the advantages that we enjoy. Free movement of person, free trade. I mean, I agree that when we joined the European Union, there was a substantial tariff barrier, 7-8%, and we wanted to emulate the Germans. And way back in the 60s and 70s, there was a case to join the common market. But now there isn't. The EU's external tariff, overall external tariff, is now, I believe, below 1%.
You're talking about tariffs. I'm talking about people here. You could not guarantee, if we were to leave, and it may be an acrimonious split. We don't know whether this would happen in a friendly way, because the EU would see it as a great blow to the EU for a major nation like Britain to leave. Why would they have an incentive to continue to give us the right to study, work, retire, receive health care in the EU when we want none of the responsibilities?
Well, why would they take it away from us?
Because we're not a member of the club.
No, but it's just as much in their advantage to send their students here and all the rest. It's a reciprocal arrangement. Nothing would change. No trade barriers would be set up. This is a myth. This is a myth that the political class, I'm afraid, believes, that were we simply to repeal the treaties of Rome, something ghastly would happen. It wouldn't.
But you cannot guarantee that it wouldn't.
Well,
resentment in Berlin and Paris could well say, if the British want to go their own way, if they want to be this offshore island, that's fine. But the people cannot enjoy the free movement of capital and labour, which has been one of the greatest benefits of the EU.
We are more important economically to the European Union than Switzerland. Switzerland has those benefits. Why shouldn't we? Of course we would. They would come running after us for a free trade agreement. If we started to say we're going to start putting up barriers, they suffer much more than we. Are they going to stop selling us their wine, their cars? Of course not. This is in the reality of international business and trade. This is a complete shibboleth.
In recent years, because of the success of the British economy, many Europeans have come to work here. And many people would say that has been not just to their benefit, but to our benefit too. Sure. Whether it's French workers in the City of London or the ubiquitous Polish plumber. Why would you want to stop that? You want a ban on immigration, including EU.
Yes, of course, because on immigration, we think that this country is suffering from a certain amount of indigestion. And it's time we digested and accommodated what we already have. And we would put European workers in the same category as Australian, Canadian, New Zealand or American workers. And we wouldn't have a total ban. We would allow people to come in on work permits who we wanted to have. And it might well be the same the other way around.
But there are 250,000 French workers alone in the City of London, within 20 miles of where we are now. The City of London became the great world's financial centre because of Spanish workers, German workers, Scandinavians coming here.
Americans.
And Americans too. You would stop that.
No,
you would freeze it. Why?
No, we would leave that as it is and say if any more wanted to come in.
Sorry, a 5-year freeze on immigration.
That's a freeze. That's not kicking them out.
Well, no, I didn't say kick them out. No. I said you would stop any more coming in.
No, we wouldn't.
A 5-year freeze on immigration for permanent settlement.
For permanent settlement.
Now, why would you want to stop French or Polish or German or Spanish or American from coming here?
We're talking about permanent settlement. We're not talking about people coming here to work. Our ban is on permanent settlement because we think there's enough of it. And I don't know if you know, but there are at the moment 5,000 new people settling here permanently every year at the moment. Every week. That makes 250,000 a year. And the fact is that our services and our infrastructure and everything simply can't go on taking this rate of increase. So what we want to see is a freeze. We're not saying that we're not going to have people in. Of course there'll be genuine asylum, and of course the families.
Either you have a freeze or you don't. Either you allow some in or you have a freeze. If you allow some in, it's not a freeze.
No, forgive me, Andrew. If you have a freeze for permanent settlement, that is a freeze for permanent settlement. It does not stop the Americans continuing to come in, the Australians, the Canadians. As
temporary workers.
Well, on a work permit, and when they've been here for a certain period of time, I don't know what it is, 5 years or something like that, then they can stay.
So it's not a freeze?
Well, it is a freeze on new people flooding in, which they are at the moment, for permanent settlement. Our borders have been completely abandoned and deliberately abandoned.
So all I have to say as an American or a Frenchman is I'm coming here temporarily, and if I can stay here for 5 years, I'll become permanent.
Like us going there, you would have to get a permit. It's exactly what happens if you want to go and work in New York.
Is it true that you would like to see a hung parliament as a result of this election?
Yes, I'm afraid I have come to that conclusion.
Now, could you explain to our audience why, as the most Eurosceptic of all parties, you would like a parliament where the balance of power would lie in the hands of the most pro-European party of all, called the Lib Dems?
Well, that remains to be seen. I mean, we can't say that until we see the result of the election. But I'll tell you why.
But that's the likely result of a hung parliament.
I'll tell you why. A hung parliament, I agree, will set up a certain amount of confusion. It probably won't last very long. There will probably be another election fairly soon. And I hope UKIP will be in a position then to show all the failed old parties that they cannot form a government unless they grant the British people the referendum on our EU membership, which we were promised. And if you say to me, but surely the Conservatives are more Eurosceptic and all the rest of it and must have David Cameron in. David Cameron with a working majority is certainly the end of this country. And I'll tell you why. Because he has ruled out any form of referendum on our EU membership for 5 years.
But he said if there's any more European treaties involving integration, there would have to be a referendum.
Yeah, but that, you see, that I'm afraid is a red herring from Mr. Cameron. Because if there were any more powers being passed to Brussels, all he has to do is veto that in the Council. And what you've got to think of is 5 more years of integration into the European project. You know, already things are going. The City of London, supervision has gone, the Foreign Service has gone, the embassies are going, Justice and Home Affairs is going, the public prosecutor is on there. They say they don't want the public prosecutor, but so you've got to think of 5 more years, and at the end of that, we won't just be enmeshed in the tentacles of the corrupt octopus. We may well be in its bowel and be unable to escape. And that is a frightening prospect.
Are there some Eurosceptic candidates, probably Tories, who, though not exactly on the UKIP wavelength, are close to you, that you won't stand against?
Yes.
How many?
I will be making some announcement, I think, early next week. I'm not sure yet. I'm working on it.
A handful?
I think, I don't know yet. I don't know. At the party conference, I said 7 or 8. It may be up to a dozen. And I'm even thinking of, in some constituencies, asking our activists to support these people, of whatever party. They are mostly Conservatives, because the Conservatives...
Will there be some Labour ones?
There will be at least one Labour one at the moment, yes.
Around a dozen?
I haven't been able to find a Lib Dem yet, I'm afraid.
I wouldn't waste too much time.
No,
looking, I think.
anyway, we'd like a Lib Dem if we could find one.
I'm sure you would. So around a dozen candidates, not of UKIP, that are sufficiently sceptical for you to step back.
To step back.
And maybe even support.
And maybe even because we don't want to stop those people getting into the House of Commons. If we're not going to win the seat, I don't want our activity to stop people who are genuine come-outers, and I'm afraid I have to be absolutely sure of that.
Good. Now, are you doing this unilaterally, or are you in discussions with them, putting conditions to them for withdrawing support?
It's a matter of trust. I know.
So you're not going to say, we'll withdraw if we really
we know. We're
doing it.
We're saying we know who you are.
we know
from your record.
And you know where they're standing.
And we know where they're standing. We know where Philip Davis in Shipley stands. We know where Douglas Carswell stands. We know where Philip Holloway stands.
These are some of the names.
Yeah, and we would be mad if we put candidates up against them, because in all those 3 cases, a successful UKIP campaign could well stop them getting into the House of Commons. And those are not seats we're going to win.
What is the best you can hope to do on May the 6th?
The best we can hope to do is to win, obviously, Buckingham, Nigel Farage's seat, maybe a few other seats. I can't say how many, but as many as we possibly can. I would, of course, we would want that. But the best we can hope to do, short of that, is to show that UKIP has made a difference. That the 3 failed old parties, as I've said, cannot form a government unless the British people are given the referendum that
But you could end up with no MPs, you accept
We could, I accept that. Of course, that's up to the British people.
Malcolm Pearson, thank you for being on Straight Talk.